When we say that an organization has a certain type of culture, what do we mean? Let's take a look at the 4 levels of organizational culture. Organizational culture is a system of shared values, norms, and assumptions that guides members' attitudes and behavior and influences how they perceive and react to their environment. These assumptions are usually taken for granted by organizational members and are taught to new members as they're socialized into the group. An organization's culture is reflected in how work gets done and how employees interact with each other. It takes a long time for a culture to evolve and a long time to change it. When culture supports business strategy, the firm can become high-performing. Trust is the foundation of culture and is earned through repeated interactions over time. When a positive culture becomes strong enough, employee interactions become more efficient, relationships improve, and employees cooperate to achieve common goals. When culture supports business strategy, the firm can become high-performing. Common organizational culture themes include ethics, innovation, being casual or formal, and collaboration. Of course, as important as it is to create and maintain the right culture, doing so is not necessarily easy. Cultures are made up of formal and informal practices, artifacts, espoused values, norms, and assumptions. Artifacts are the physical manifestations of the culture, including the myths and stories told about the organization or its founder, awards, ceremonies and rituals, decorations, office space allocations, the dress code, and so on. Espoused values and norms are those that are explicitly stated by the organization. Enacted values and norms are those that employees exhibit based on their observations of what actually goes on in the organization. If a company's top managers engage in illegal or unethical behavior, these are enacted values and norms of the firm, no matter what its formally stated values or ethics are. If a company has the espoused value that ethics are important, the difference between the espoused values and the enacted creates a gap that can negatively affect employee attitudes and company performance. Performance management, feedback, and compensation systems will help align espoused values and enacted values and norms. Assumptions are those organizational values that have become so taken for granted over time that they become the core of the company's culture. These basic assumptions are highly resistant to change and guide organizational behavior. This figure illustrates the 4 levels of culture. Organizational culture has 4 levels: artifacts, assumptions, espoused values, and enacted values. Organizational culture is the key to organizational excellence, and the function of leadership is the creation and management of culture. A leader has to define the culture to support the business strategy, consistently behave in ways that demonstrate the culture, explain the culture to employees so they understand why it's critical, and hold him or herself and others accountable for maintaining it. Let's take a look at the ways leaders can influence an organization's culture. Develop a clear sense of mission and values about what the company should be, and communicate to employees through what you pay attention to, measure, and control. Select employees who can share, express, and reinforce the desired values in order to help build the desired culture. Use daily routines and concentrate actions and behaviors to demonstrate and exemplify appropriate values and beliefs. Consistently role model behaviors that reinforce the culture. Make your human resource management procedures and criteria consistent. Nurture traditions and rituals that express, define, and reinforce the culture. Changes in strategy, technology, and organizational structure all trigger a need for changes in employees' attitudes, behaviors, values, and skills. Organizational culture has many layers. Outer layers of the culture, such as the marketing strategies and customer service perceptions, can change fairly quickly. Inner layers, including fundamental values and ideologies, are much slower to change. Organizations can also have different cultures in different areas. Different business units or subgroups of organizations can develop unique cultures supporting their own unique business needs. This can actually mean that employees who belong to multiple subgroups simultaneously participate in several different organizational cultures. Firms develop distinct conflict cultures or shared norms for managing conflict, which reflect different degrees of active versus passive and agreeable versus disagreeable conflict management norms. Active conflict management norms resolve conflict openly, whereas passive conflict management norms tend to avoid addressing conflict. Agreeable conflict management norms resolve a conflict in a cooperative manner, whereas disagreeable conflict management norms resolve conflict competitively. This results in 4 types of conflict cultures: dominating, collaborative, avoidant, and passive-aggressive, as shown in this figure. Dominating conflict cultures are active and disagreeable. Open confrontations are accepted, as well as heated arguments and threats. Collaborative conflict cultures are active and agreeable. Employees actively manage and resolve conflicts cooperatively to find the best solution for all involved parties. Avoidant conflict cultures are passive and agreeable. This type of culture strives to preserve order and control or to maintain harmony in interpersonal relationships. Typical behaviors include accommodating or giving in to another's point of view, changing the subject, or evading open discussion of conflict issues. Passive-aggressive conflict cultures are both passive and disagreeable. Rather than dealing openly with conflict, this culture develops norms to handle it via passive resistance, such as refusing to participate in discussions, giving the silent treatment, withholding information, or withdrawing. There are 4 kinds of cultures of conflict. These vary based on active or passive norms and agreeable or disagreeable norms. Research has supported the idea that pro-diversity cultures are related to lower turnover among blacks, whites, and Hispanics. Perceiving the organization values diversity is also related to reducing absenteeism among black employees. An organization's culture of inclusion reflects the extent to which majority members value efforts to increase minority representation, and whether the qualifications and abilities of minority members are questioned. Innovation is the process of creating and doing new things that are introduced into the marketplace as products, processes, or services. Innovation involves every aspect of the organization, from research through development, manufacturing, to marketing. Many risks are associated with being an innovative organization. The most basic is the risk that decisions about new technology or innovation will backfire. As research proceeds, the engineers and scientists continue to develop new ideas or solutions to problems. There is always the possibility that innovations will fail to perform as expected. A second risk is the possibility that a competitor will make decisions enabling it to get an innovation to the market first. The marketplace has become a breeding ground for continuous innovation. Innovation can be radical, systems, or incremental. Let's take a look at the types of innovation. A radical innovation, sometimes called disruptive innovation, is a major breakthrough that changes or creates whole new industries. Systems innovation creates a new functionality by assembling parts in new ways. Incremental innovation continues the technological improvement and extends the application of radical and systems innovations. There are many more incremental innovations than there are radical or systems innovations. Intrapreneurship is entrepreneurship activity that takes place within the context of the organization. The most common means of developing innovation in traditional organization is through cooperative research or research and development. Cooperative research is usually set up to support existing businesses, provide incremental innovations in the organization's business, and explore potential new technology bases. It often takes place in a laboratory, either on site of the main corporate facility or some distance away from normal operations. Innovation and creativity are essential elements of effective organizational behavior. Socialization is the process through which individuals become social beings. Organizational socialization is the process through which employees learn about their organization's culture and pass their knowledge and understanding on to others. Employees are socialized into organizations just as people are socialized into societies. That is, they come to know over time what is acceptable in the organization and what is not, how to communicate their feelings, and how to interact with others. They learn both through observation and through efforts by managers to communicate this information to them. Research into the process of socialization indicates for many employees, socialization programs do not necessarily change their values, but instead, they make employees more aware of the differences between personal and organizational values and help them develop ways to cope with these differences. A variety of organizational mechanisms can affect the socialization of workers in organizations. Probably the most important are the examples that new employees see in the behavior of experienced people in the organization. Through observing examples, new employees develop a repertoire of stories that they can use to guide their actions. When a decision needs to be made, new employees can ask, "What would my boss do in this situation?" This is not to suggest that formal training, corporate pamphlets, and corporate statements about organizational culture are unimportant in the socialization process. However, these factors tend to support the socialization process based on people's close observations of the actions of others. In some organizations, the culture described in pamphlets and presented in formal training sessions conflicts with the values of the organization as they're expressed in the actions of people. When managers attempt to change organizational culture, they're attempting to change people's basic assumptions about what is and what is not appropriate behavior in the organization. Changing from a traditional organization to a team-based organization is one example of an organizational culture change. Let's briefly discuss important elements of cultural change process in the following sections. Managing symbols. Research suggests that organizational culture is understood and communicated through the use of stories and other symbolic media. If this is correct, managers interested in changing culture should attempt to substitute stories and myths that support new cultural values for those that support old ones. They can do so by creating situations that give rise to new stories. The difficulty of change. Changing a firm's culture is a long and difficult process. A primary problem is that upper managers, no matter how dedicated they are to implementing some new cultural value, may sometimes inevitably revert to old patterns of behavior. This happens, for example, when a manager dedicated to implementing the value that lower-level employees' ideas are important vehemently attacks a subordinate's idea. The stability of change. The process of changing a firm's culture starts with a need for change and moves through a transition period in which efforts are made to adopt new values and beliefs. In the long run, a firm that successfully changes its culture will find that new values and beliefs are just as stable and influential as the old ones. Value systems tend to be self-reinforcing. Once they're in place, changing them requires enormous effort. Research suggests that some firms have performance-enhancing values and others have performance-reducing values. In this case, managers should try to change their organizational culture. However, this is a difficult thing to do.